Don't let the ghosts and the ghouls disturb you, darling.
Darling, the only ghoul in the house is you.
Welcome back, my friends. Tonight we'll be moving on to level 2. Now, if you missed levels 0 and 1, I will link it right up here, or you can always stick around and watch it afterwards. Now, this level is full of some strange, obscure, and sometimes terrifying subjects, with a few ones you might recognize sprinkled in. Now, let's get started. Level 2. Turn on the light, TV, radio, phone, and everything that can make noise. Wow, this is a huge topic. Spirit possession is a phenomenon that spans thousands of years. As long as we've been human, we've been getting possessed. As such, I could do an entire video, if not a whole series, on different possessions from different cultures, so I'll do my best to sum it up here. Spirit possession is identified by an unusual or altered state of consciousness and strange behaviors, supposedly caused by the control of spirits, ghosts, demons, or gods. Now, depending on the culture in which it's found, possession may be voluntary or involuntary. We've all heard about the damage and pain it can cause, but some cultures believe that it can also be beneficial. Here in the United States, we are of course most familiar with demonic possession from Abrahamic religions. Possessions we've seen in many movies and stories throughout the years, the biggest one of course being the 1973 horror classic, The Exorcist. One of the cases that I'd love to cover in the future is the exorcism of Roland Doe. The boy was only 13 years old in the late 1940s when strange things began to happen around his house after the death of his aunt. What began as a simple haunting snowballed into full-blown possession. Throughout the years, priests performed multiple exorcisms on young Roland Doe, but the possession only seemed to get worse until the final exorcism was conducted with the help of priests Walter Halloran and William Van Roo. At some point during the exorcism ritual, Halloran's nose was broken, but in the end, the priests claimed they were successful in exorcising the demons from Roland's body, and the young boy went on to live a normal life. Okiku is a character in the kabuki play and Japanese ghost story Bansho Sereyashiki. There are many different versions of this tale, but it goes a little something like this. Once there was a beautiful servant named Okiku. She worked for the samurai Aoyama Tesan. Okiku often refused him when he said he was in love with her and wanted to marry her, so he tricked her into believing that she had carelessly lost one of the family's 10 precious plates. Such a crime would normally result in her death. In a frenzy, she counted and recounted the 9 plates many times. However, she could not find the 10th and went to Aoyama in guilty tears. The samurai offered to overlook the matter if she finally became his lover, but again she refused. Enraged, Aoyama threw her down a well to her death. It is said that Okiku became a vengeful spirit who tormented her murderer by counting to 9 and then making a terrible shriek to represent the 10th plate. Or perhaps she was tormenting herself and couldn't find the 10th plate and cried out in agony every time she never could. I love this story, as it does sort of remind me of some of the older ghost stories such as Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart, and many others in which the ghost of a murder victim begins to torment their killer after their tragic death. The Ghost of Queen Esther. Queen Esther of Pennsylvania was a Native American woman belonging to the Iroquois in the mid-1700s. The story goes that after learning of the death of her son due to a violent argument between him and a drunken townsman, Queen Esther ordered the raid of a nearby farm as revenge for her loss. Nobody knows exactly how many townsfolk died during that raid, but it's thought that a man by the name of Arthur Rosen and his wife Jana were killed and scalped. A military force of 200 men were ordered to find Queen Esther and get revenge for the killings. After the defeat of her warriors during a fierce battle, Queen Esther attempted to flee with the women and children of her village into the surrounding forests in hopes of escaping to the Chemung River. Historians have argued over the exact details of what happened next, but the common claim is that Hartley and his men caught up with the fleeing villagers and forced them to march to a nearby pond. The women and children were lined up at the pond's bank and executed in mass numbers as Queen Esther was forced to watch the ordeal. She was then hung from a nearby oak tree and dismembered before being thrown into the pond with the murdered villagers. Early documents have reported that the screams of the victims could be heard in the town of Athens, which is several miles away. The curse comes from the writings of one of the soldiers that was present at the massacre, stating how her final words placed a curse on any white settlers who would set foot on the land. Beginning in the early 1800s, residents of the community known as Queen Esther have reported hearing unidentified screams coming from the surrounding forests. It is believed that these are spirits of the massacred villagers. Lady in Red. A lady in red, or the Red Lady, is a type of female ghost similar to the White Lady, but according to legend, she is more specifically attributed to a jilted lover, a prostitute killed in a fit of passion, or a woman of vanity. In all cases, the lady in red is seen wearing a scarlet or blood red dress. She is said to be typically friendly in disposition, with a story attached to historic hotels, theaters, or other public places, with a higher frequency of reports coming from old mining communities due to the prostitution trade. One story of a lady in red comes from Chicago's Drake Hotel, in which a jealous woman wearing a blood-red dress took her life after jumping from the 10th floor. Guests claimed to see her in her last steps from the Gold Coast Room, the Palm Court, and on the 10th floor. There are countless stories of a lady in red from all parts of the United States, and it doesn't just stay around here. She's also been seen in Canada, the UK, and across Asia. I've actually had an encounter myself with the lady in red one night at about 3 a.m. But my friends, that's a story for another day. Greenbrier Ghost. On January 23rd of 1897, Elva Zona Hester Shue of Lewisburg, West Virginia, a bride of 3 months, was found dead at the bottom of the stairs leading to the 2nd floor of the log house where she lived with her new husband. Now, this would be an interesting case for a true crime episode, but what gets it on this list is the fact that this is the only documented case in which a ghost helped solve a crime and convict her murderer. So, after Elva was found dead in her home, the cause of death was listed as childbirth, and she was buried in the local cemetery. Some days later, her mother, Mary Jane Hester, claimed to have seen Zona's ghost at her bedside. According to Mary Jane's story, the ghost insisted that her husband, Erasmus Shue, had murdered her. Armed with the story the ghost had told her, Mary Jane Hester visited the local prosecutor, John Alfred Preston, and spent several hours in his office convincing him to reopen the matter of her daughter's death. Whether he believed the story of the ghost or not is unknown, but he did have enough doubt to exhume the body and order a second autopsy. According to the autopsy report published on March 9th of 1897, quote, "The discovery was made that the neck was broken and the windpipe mashed. On the throat there were marks of fingers indicating that she had been choked. The neck was dislocated between the first and second vertebrae. The ligaments were torn and ruptured. The windpipe had been crushed at the point in front of the neck," unquote. Erasmus Shue was arrested and charged with the murder of his wife. Some people I saw were convinced that the mother actually made up this story about the ghost to convince the sheriff to take another look, but we may never know. Pedro Benedit. It took a bit of work to figure out who this was referring to, but after searching it up, I came across a book called The Ghosts of St. Augustine. Written by Tom Lapham, the book contained a story about the ghost of a Mr. Oh, geez, forgive me. Pedro Benedit Harritiner Catalan. Woof. Who was a Spanish soldier who served as an interim co-governor of Spanish Florida between 1651 and 1654. So, the story begins in the mid-80s after Pat and Maggie Patterson had been living in their beautiful, if not a little spooky, home for a few years. The home was one of the oldest and apparently one of the nicest in St. Augustine. The house was probably built in the early 1630s, but no one knows for sure. But what we are sure of is that it belonged to Pedro Benedit. The incident began when Maggie looked into the living room and saw not 3 steps away a tall, handsome gentleman dressed in European fashion from the mid-1600s, wearing high cavalier boots and a plumed hat. His clothes were dark shades of gray and black, and he looked like he just stepped out of a black and white movie. The gentleman glided towards Maggie, stopping just short in front of her. Then he smiled, doffed his hat, and bowed gallantly in greeting. Maggie stood and turned towards the pantry to call Pat, and when she turned back again, the gentleman had vanished. She was convinced that she had just had a visit from the ghost of the house's previous owner, Pedro Benedit. Krahang. After the Nantakion in the last video, I did a little bit more digging into Thai ghosts, and I just gotta say, those are some of the most amazing, interesting, and horrifying stories I've ever seen. But this one's a little bit goofy. So the Krahang is a male ghost who spends his days in the guise of an ordinary villager, but transforms at night. Shirtless and covered below the waist by a loincloth, Krahang takes to the skies with the aid of rice baskets acting as wings, and has been blamed for attacks on women in local villages. In July of 2017, an 18-year-old girl in the, Buriram province claimed that while she was in the restroom within her house at night, before going to bed, she saw a Krahang through the gaps near the ceiling. It appeared as a large man with a winged back. The girl panicked and ran out of the restroom. One village elder said she saw the Krahang for 10 years. It flies in pairs with glowing eyes like a thunderbolt, and when she tried to get her son to film the creature with his cell phone, it wouldn't record. The village elder blamed a nearby house in which she had previously lived but now was abandoned. From what I've read, a lot of Thai ghosts seem to come from abandoned places. One little side note I have to say, while I was looking for footage and movies of these creatures, I did find a lot of naked lady films involving these cryptids. What's going on over there, Thailand? Alright, once again you're going to have to forgive me for the coming pronunciations. I will do my best. Banjhākri and Banjhākrini are shamanic deities in the tradition of the Kirati people of Nepal. They are a couple and possibly different aspects of the same being. They are supernatural shamans of the forest. In the Nepali language, Ban means wilderness, and Jhākri means shaman, and Jhākrini means shamaness. So wilderness or forest shaman and shamaness. Banjhākri is a short, wild simian trickster who is a descendant of the sun. His ears are large and his feet point backwards. Long, matted hair covers his entire body except for his face and palms. He plays a golden, he plays a fancy drum. So the Banjhākri finds children who have the potential to be great shamans and takes them back to his cave for training. There, the children are in danger of being eaten whole by the Banjhākrini. The Banjhākrini is both bear-like and humanoid, with long hair on her head, long pendulous breasts, and backwards-pointing feet. She is usually described as bloodthirsty and brutal. She carries a symbolic golden sickle. So let me get this straight. The man kidnaps the kids, but not out of malice, he wants to train them. But while they're training, they have to avoid the crazy child-eating shamaness? That's so weird, right? Mediumship is the practice of mediating communication between familiar spirits or spirits of the dead and living human beings. Practitioners are of course known as mediums or spirit mediums. So you may be wondering, what's the difference between a psychic and a medium? The term psychic is often used as a catch-all phrase for anyone who works in the paranormal, but a medium is a psychic who has fine-tuned his or her extrasensory perceptions and can interface with the spirits in other dimensions. They are able to feel or hear thoughts and voices or mental impressions from the spirit world. There are many different types of mediumship, and I'll explain just a few basic ones that I found interesting: mental mediumship and channeling. Mental mediumship is when a medium communicates with a spirit through telepathy. The medium mentally hears, sees, or feels messages from spirits. Directly or with the help of a spirit guide, the medium then passes the information on to whoever the message was meant for. Channeling is when a medium seemingly goes into a trance and leaves their body, allowing a spirit entity to borrow it and speak through them. When in a trance, the medium appears to enter a sort of cataleptic state. They may seek out specific spirits of the dead, or they may be contacted unbidden by some unknown force that wishes to communicate. I don't doubt that there are people out there that have special abilities, but I think we need to be very, very careful about who we believe and why. Just think of the amazing things people can do without the help of spirits, just like magicians or illusionists, and you'll see exactly why we have to be very careful and very skeptical about people in this field. Hey guys, I had planned on making this level just one long video, but there was so much cool information that I just couldn't bring myself to cut it out. So, the next part will be out very soon. If you're feeling up to it and able, please consider donating to help keep this channel alive, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now when part 3 is ready, I'm going to put it up right here. Until then, feel free to watch one of my other videos. Thanks everybody. Good night.
Every day is Halloween.